I was actually invited to give kind of a big picture, and then I'm going to hand it out over to the Grand Boulevard folks about specifically some of the economic benefits of transit-oriented development, TOD, as we like to call it affectionately, TOD, TOD. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my role with supporting the Great Communities Collaborative, which is a 9-county region collaborative around equitable transit-oriented development. And then I'm going to talk about some of the economic benefits of TOD, both economics in terms of a growing market, economic in terms of filling public coffers, which we are all very concerned about these days, and also personal, your asset building for yourself and your own little economy of yourself. So, and then we'll hear a lot more about the Grand Boulevard initiative. So real quick, the Great Communities Collaborative, which is the initiative that I support, housed at the San Francisco Foundation, is dedicated to building healthy, thriving neighborhoods around the 9-county Bay Area, linked to regional opportunities by a premier transit network. And this slide shows the 30-plus stations and routes that we are focused on and we've worked on. And so we work very locally at specific stations, both with regional policy leads as well as community-based organizations. And then we also work on regional policy, trying to influence our regional agencies to essentially shift funding away from highways to urban transit and from sprawl to good urban infill and affordable housing. And then we also work on financing those efforts. So who is the Great Communities Collaborative? These are some of our funders. The San Francisco Foundation hosts it, but and we are the co-chair, but my other co-chair, Alex Andrade from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, is right there. Shout out to Alex, my wonderful co-chair here. And so these two local community foundations support this region-wide collaborative, and then we've been able to attract funding from some much bigger fish than us little community foundations like Ford Foundation, Hewlett, some of these bigger private foundations to support this effort. And my advisory board, you'll see some familiar names on here, is these organizations, these 10 organizations, and they meet really every other month or so to represent really a cross-sector of expertise from housing, transit, economic development, social justice, urban planning, financing, and they're complemented, as I mentioned, with another set of about a dozen grassroots community-based organizations, very local groups, who we also fund to do community organizing to support good plans, good policies, well-designed infill development projects. And we really wouldn't have the impact we're having around the region if it wasn't for all these groups getting together and really aligning their agendas. And I'm just going to quickly touch on two places that we're working. One is International Boulevard in Oakland, which has some, maybe some lessons learned also or we can learn some things probably from El Camino in Oakland. And we're putting in a bus rapid transit line. AC Transit is putting in bus rapid transit down the 7-mile corridor. And you see the before picture is actually currently what it looks like. A lot of El Camino looks like that. I mean El Camino. A lot of International Boulevard looks like this. And then the after picture is you can see one less car lane, wider sidewalks, streetscape improvements, rehab to new housing, businesses. That's the vision. And we need all those groups I mentioned before and many others to really bring this, make this a reality. We need to work together to finance the housing that we're looking for, the know-how to do business attraction, so we can work together to create complete neighborhoods with opportunities for all. Another place we're working, and Michelle, who introduced us, is the site lead for the Great Communities Collaborative for Diridon Station, which is right here in San Jose, as you all know. And it's not only a Great Communities Collaborative site, it's also the terminus of the Grand Boulevard, and it's why you're here today. And the focus in Diridon has been on complete streets, so definitely pedestrian, bicycle, access and improvements, progressive parking policies, creating a destination, as Megan was alluding to. We need to do more of that here, and having a strong mix of uses and park and public realm improvements. So as you know, currently we have Caltrain, we have VTA, we have local buses. Am I missing any other transit agencies that currently touch Diridon? The ACE, Amtrak, there, right. And then in the future, this will be a high-speed rail station. This will also be a BART station. So it could be really the Grand Central Station of the West.
Yeah, and we have the leader behind that, Mr. Diridon.
Oh, Mr. Diridon himself. All right. Thank you for all your leadership here. We're really pleased in many ways how the plan is evolving. These are some of the walking and bicycling improvements. The solid line are current, but a lot of the dotted are improvements that will be coming as part of the plan. And these are some ideas, not yet of Diridon, other places that we've been promoting to help the city and the public imagine the potential for Diridon Station. So attractive urban design, designed for bikes, new public realm improvements. So that's a little bit on Diridon. And then I wanted to give, as I mentioned, a big picture on some of the economic benefits of TOD, and I'm going to draw upon a report that I worked on in my last job at ULI, Urban Land Institute, called The New California Dream, which looks at demographic and economic trends shaping the housing market in California, and also some of the work of Chris Lineberger at the Brookings Institute. And a lot of these next few graphs are really about the demand, the growing demand for transit-oriented development. And this has come up a few times already this morning, is demographic changes. And the report argues that the American dream is being redefined. And the council member this morning talked about that as well. And it's really being redefined by two generations. Anybody else from Gen X like me who are really irrelevant? Yeah, you know, we're irrelevant. We still are. Because we're the dip there. We're a very small generation and we don't have a lot of demographic impact. But the big generations, as you can see are certainly the older generation, the baby boomers, still biggest generation. And then coming up, Gen Y, 25 to mid-30s, and that generation is really a different generation than the previous two generations. And as many of you are representing that generation, you probably know the most mobile people in America flock to urban centers, choosing a city first and then finding a job, which is very different than the baby boomers, not getting their license at the lowest rate since before World War II. I mean, when I turned 18, that was like, or 16, it was get your license, as soon as you could. Now it's just not as important. So it's a very big demographic shift just in terms of the generations. The other thing that's, of course, impacting TOD demand, market demand, is the price of gas. It's going up. And it's obviously pushing people, I would argue maybe it's not going up enough, but it is pushing people to get out of their cars. The other thing that's really changing is home ownership. And the home ownership is not the asset building strategy it used to be. So equity, so how much you actually own of your home as a share of the overall value of the home is dipped, as we know. Foreclosure crisis reflects that. But I found this graph very interesting because it goes back to 1945 when typically an American had 85% equity in their home. And it's been going down and down and down. And now today it's under 40%, or in 2009 I think it's similar today. Most Americans you don't really own your home, even if you are a homeowner. And the bank owns most of it. And so this is increasing the demand for rental housing. Home ownership is not as attractive as it used to be.
Doesn't that have to do with supply and demand? That they're building a lot of rentals where I live, which cannot be 60% rental right now.
but they're not building new housing. So in fact, the homeownership is going up and up in price because there's less of it.
I would actually argue the opposite, and I'll skip ahead to this slide, which shows the demand for different types of housing, and that when you look at multifamily versus all the way on the right, conventional lot, single-family, detached homes, the supply is the blue line. The green is the demand, expected demand, and you can see the gap for different housing types. So this isn't specifically rental versus homeownership, but it's multifamily versus conventional lot.
I'd love to talk to people about the lease condos instead of rentals.
Well, the condo market is coming back a little bit since this is 2009.
But I'd love to be able to buy
Yeah.
somewhere in this place I grew up in.
Yeah, so you're seeing a lot more multifamily being built because of this type of demand, but you're absolutely right. The gap is huge. If you look at the gap between what people are looking for and what's being supplied, it's very large, and that's what this slide points to, is the need to build more multifamily, both home ownership and rental, but home ownership absolutely as well. And it shows, on the right, all the way on the right, the conventional lot shows that we've totally overbuilt another type of housing, which is single-family, large lots, mostly on the edge of the region, and those are totally oversupplied at this point. The other thing is that people always say, okay, well, people need to move to the suburbs because when they have kids, they need to be able to drive them around everywhere. Well, you know what? People aren't having kids as much as they used to. This is households without children, and there's been a big drop since 1960. We had households with a child close to 50%, and today it's down to 30% and still dropping. I feel like I'm usurping the Grand Boulevard time, so I'm gonna just skim. Do I have some time? Okay. I know that's what mostly people wanted to hear about, so I'm talking about other bigger trends. But this is comparing. This is from CEOs for Cities, walkability as raising home values in U.S. cities, and both of these are neighborhoods in Washington D.C. And this study looked at 90,000 sales. In 2008, 2009, in 15 metro areas, and they controlled for size, socioeconomic type of homes. And who's heard of Walk Score? Okay, great. So they looked at walkscore.org. For anybody who hasn't heard of it, is a great way to see how walkable is your neighbor. You can plug in your address and or your work address and find out your walk score, anything from 1 to 100. And so what this study showed is that every walk score point, so if you go up at the percentages, it's increasing value of homes. So somewhere between $500 and $3,000 in value per home for every walk score point. So the point is that walkability is strongly associated with higher housing values in nearly all metro areas. And so this is of interest to any public sector folks in terms of increasing property tax, certainly to any homeowners, increasing property values. It also points to the need of affordable housing, because as we improve areas and make them more walkable, the value does go up, and we need to make sure that we have still a mix of incomes being able to live in these improved neighborhoods. And so that's why the Great Communities Collaborative is a big affordable housing advocate. So this is, and also I understand from the Grand Boulevard Initiative research also that commercial properties similarly, it's not just housing, but if you look at walkability scores of commercial properties, they're worth 30 to 40% more in areas that are more walkable versus low walkability scores. So you can check your own score again at walkscore.org. Okay, perfect, 5 minutes. Okay, infrastructure costs. This is another important thing for especially public officials, but everyone, the public, to understand is the cost of building highways versus inner city infrastructure. And this is, again, I think this is a snapshot from some of the Grand Boulevard Initiative research. This is Portland. And in Portland, it's a comparison of a single mile of urban freeway costs an average of $65 million per mile to build. So 1 mile of freeway, $65 million. That's about the same figure as the entire amount the city spent on 20 years on its bicycle infrastructure. So, and then this study also looked at that bicycle-related economic activity in Portland is approximately 90 million. So it's producing, bicycle activity is producing a lot of revenue for the city. And so, there's just tremendous cost savings for building more efficiently and more for the local community, as opposed to just trying to drive people through it. And I know for myself, living on the Valencia Street corridor in the Mission, I don't know any in San Francisco, I don't know if any have been there lately, but I would say the thousands of bicyclists since we put in the widened sidewalks and the bike lanes is really supporting booming local businesses. And then on the very local, remember I mentioned personal level, so there's in terms of the economic arguments, there's the market, growth in the market, there's the public sector economic arguments, increasing coffers for cities and then and regions, and then also there's the very local personal economy. And this is another report that I worked on with ULI called Bay Area Burden. You can look it up, it's online, and we worked on this to look at the cost of not just housing costs, but really transportation costs. Also, when you combine them, what percentage of your income are you spending? In the Bay Area, it's average 59% housing plus transportation. Average housing plus transportation costs, 59% of people's income. And of course, the cost burden is even higher for lower income families. It's important because we always talk about housing costs, but people never think, what are your transportation costs? And in the Bay Area, if you own a car, every car you own is about $600 a month. If you count in everything, cost of the car, the gas, the insurance, etc. And that's a big cost burden. And you have to own 2 cars or 3 cars, depending on where you live, that's even more. And this looks, the Bay Area Burden Study, and you guys can look this up online again, just search Bay Area Burden, it'll show right up. And this looks city by city, looks at specifically down at San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, at what are the cost burdens for housing plus transportation, depending on which city you're in. And as I mentioned, East Palo Alto, it's 75% of people on average are spending housing plus transportation. Very high. So I'll finish with, Dwayne this morning spoke a little bit about the administration, federal administration, and the shifts that some of our members of Congress are agreeing with to redirect federal policy more towards urban transit-oriented development. Dwayne mentioned the Office of Sustainable Communities. It's really one thing he didn't say is it's very exciting. It's one of the first times you have HUD, Department of Transportation, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, all working together to set a national policy framework that's very aligned with the goals that we have. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Grand Boulevard Initiative team. Thank you.
So, back in like 2004, Samtrans started looking at use around our transit stations. We had a new general manager, and what they found in most of these studies was El Camino was a huge barrier to livability in communities. At the same time, joint venture Silicon Valley Network in San Jose was looking at the corridor from, transportation, economic, the street standpoint. Well, we kind of brought Mike Scanlon and Russ Hancock together, and they decided it would be a good idea to poll the different agencies that are involved in the corridor to see if there was interest in improving El Camino Real. So in 2006, we convinced all the cities, and you think about it, who has purview over this corridor? It's a state highway, so there's Caltrans. At the region, there's MTC, ABAG, the Air District. There's 19 cities, there's 2 counties, there's 2 transit districts, there's 2 congestion management agency functions. It goes on and on. And then there's all the interested, parties like Greenbelt. So everybody came around the table and they said, yeah, it's ugly, it's not functional, it's not safe, and we want to do something. So since 2006, I've had the fortune to be part of the staffing for that. So we kind of look for the common ground where people can move forward. And also, this is not even a formal organization. It is really just a table around which people sit and bring forward issues. So everybody, this is what I love, it's the reverse of regional planning, right? Because everybody's on the same level. And I think that is really important. And what we rely on is that everybody's going to do their part. So no city is going to tell VTA what to do, and likewise VTA isn't going to tell a city what to do. It's really, they do their part to realize the vision. So the first thing that happened was they developed a vision. And it really, let's see if I can really say it, El Camino will realize its full potential as a place for its residents to live, work, shop, and play, to create links between communities that promote transit, walking, and an improved and meaningful quality of life. So there is that, and they went on to do guiding principles, and actually, Ronnie, a long time ago, got the job. I said, look at every plan that's along the corridor and come up with some themes. Chris Augenstein from VTA kind of massaged them, and we came up with 10 guiding principles. And they address this vision, right, that we're going to have a walkable mixed-use environment. Not that every building's going to be mixed use, but in a neighborhood it's mixed use. That we're going to have the growth be in this corridor because it makes sense to be near Caltrain and BART and the best, most productive bus service in both counties. And that the streets are going to be safe and walkable. There'll be complete streets for everyone. And since that time, I think 15 of the 19 cities have adopted those principles, and another 7 agencies. So when we study it, we look at, it's 43 miles from the border in San Francisco and San Jose, where it's Mission Street. I'm sorry, in Delhi City, where it's Mission Street, all the way down to Dearden Station. And within, we've calculated that within a half mile of either side, kind of walkable distance, there are 425,000 people who live there. The important part is the peninsula grew up around the Caltrain line. So we're kind of in a better position than San Jose, and not San Jose, but like the East Bay, where we have an incredible rail station infrastructure upon which to build. But right now, basically, it's pretty low density strip commercial development, as you all know. We're constrained by geography. 2/3 of San Mateo County is in open space, and we're pretty built out for single-family homes. You can see the city centers and the downtowns that go down El Camino. And then also, you can see what at the regional level are priority development areas where cities have gone and said, this is where we're going to develop, and so they're lining themselves up basically for grant funds. So there are 12 priority development areas, all you can see them on this map, all the way going down, and then we got the El Camino corridor itself to be designated as one. So what I'm going to talk to you about is the first thing we did. So for the man who said transportation, the first thing we did was we got a Caltrans planning grant, and we looked at what we called a multimodal transportation corridor plan. And it was kind of, looking at what would make BRT work, what would make complete streets work. But then, what we heard, and this was not my area at all of expertise, was that we really need to do the other side of the equation, the economic and housing part of it. And so I got a great consultant called Dina Belzer with Strategic Economics, and she helped me scope out a study I went around and asked and finally got money. I think Alex is here. We got money from the Community Foundation, we got money from our Congestion Management Agency, and we got money from MTC to do this study. And so the whole idea was, how do we make the case for transforming the corridor on an economic level? And can we point to projects that are transformational? And can we begin to measure at least the benefits, if not the costs, of individual developments? So I hope you can see this, but we didn't want to come up with a new housing and jobs scenario. So we looked at what was out there. To the left, you can see Greenbelt Alliance, probably one of the highest ones. The next one was the MTC 2007 projections. And the three to the right for Grand Boulevard, GBI, are the ones we used to do, that VTA did the modeling for, to look at BRT. So to put these numbers in context, between 2000 and 2010, the number of households increased from 135 to 145,000. In that same time, we lost 40,000 jobs. So it went from 228,000 jobs to 192,000 jobs. What you see in this graph is what they're projecting should be added. So what do people go, oh my goodness, we can't possibly do that, it's going to become Manhattan. So that was another thing we wanted to look at. We wanted to look at the benefits. So the benefits are, at an individual level, Kate talked about this. We have an aging population. We also have more people who want to live at, our single-person households. In fact, our health department in San Mateo County did a study. Most everybody wants to retire there, and half of them want to move. They want to stay in the community, but they want to move to something that is more walkable. I think that's great news. The bigger picture is, bringing back the economy in the Silicon Valley by increasing development, having people be closer to their jobs, having more of a labor force. And I've seen projections where most of the new jobs are, you're talking about $50,000 a year jobs. And that's daunting compared to what the cost of housing is that's on the market now. And so what strategic economics did as well was they looked at, if you take 1 acre of that lovely strip commercial land, which most cities say, oh my goodness, that's my tax base, don't touch it. And you put it into 3 to 4 story residential, or even 5 to 6 story, which is actually what the market is absorbing today, what would you get? And you can see that the amount of property tax revenue goes up by 4-fold to 6-fold. I mean, it's amazing. Now, on a project-by-project basis, you have to consider costs, but you're also considering them for, as Kate said, probably not many school kids, right? More seniors. And so part of this study was making the case. And by the way, all this stuff is on our website. And so what we found was that it really would only take 3 to 9% of the land in the corridor to accommodate even the highest levels of growth at this kind of 45 dwelling unit per acre. So what does that look like? Here's some samples today of what you'll find in the corridor. Look familiar? And then here's, people do these tests, can you tell the density? This just shows you a range of densities. So from the upper left-hand corner, you can see that's your 3-story townhomes detached. Moving over to the right-hand corner on the top, you've got your townhomes that are attached. Down to the left-hand corner, you're up to 25 to 30 dwelling units per acre, 3 to 4 stories, kind of stacked townhomes. A little higher down the lower right-hand corner, and so now you've got up to 30, 40 dwelling units per acre. So this is kind of like what we're looking at. And then we get to really again on this next page, you've got flats at a higher level of development, and then you're kind of getting more into the San Francisco, downtown San Jose, higher levels of development at 62, 70, and 100 plus dwelling units per acre. And my presentation isn't about this. But if you come to our next task force meeting, the American Institute of Architects in Santa Clara County is going to do a presentation on context, design and context, because it's really key. Okay, does anybody know where this is? South San Francisco, El Camino and Westboro. So we asked Friedman, Tung, and Sasaki to say, what could it look like? Here it is. So this was kind of our low, profile, low density, lower density. Who knows where this is? Oh, come on, everybody knows where this is. So this is the city of San Mateo. You're close, just south of Hillsdale. And so we said, how about San Mateo's looking at kind of a higher density level than South City. So this is what they came up with for 3 to 4 story stacked flats. And then finally, close to home, come on, where is it? Sunnyvale. And this was the highest level of density that we asked them to do renderings for. Okay, last part of my quiz. What do you think this map shows? It's centered around Redwood City. That's the project area. This is where people are coming from to work in Redwood City. So I am a huge transportation demand management advocate, because I don't think it's just about supplying buses and trains. I think it's changing people's behavior about how they travel, what they demand. And we got a $1.5 million grant from MTC. And so here's the test. If we take Redwood City, and our partners are our TDM agency, City of Redwood City, County of San Mateo, and we concentrate new things, strategies in Redwood City, can we actually change how people are traveling, change the mode? Because it's great to say we're going to develop a corridor, but when we did our modeling, until we got to the highest levels of density and jobs and housing, we saw traffic. And that's the biggest complaint, right? It's like, what the heck are you doing to my neighborhood? So what we've done is we've gotten Zipcar in there. The Alliance is doing short distance van pools. They couldn't put enough on the road to get people in shorter distance van pools. The county is rolling out a telework and flex schedule program. They want half their employees to be on an alternative work schedule. The Alliance and Samtrans are doing marketing, and the Air District is coming in with 70 bikes to do a bike share. So we're just kind of rolling these out now, and I mean, my fondest dream in all the work I'm doing is that we can actually influence people's behavior. And so this is the idea, to basically change their habits. I'm going to introduce, this is another great grant we got. We spent a year working with our task force and the cities to kind of find out what are the things that really matter that we can work on together. We called our grant Removing Barriers to Sustainable Communities, and here's what we got support for from the cities and the different agencies. Look at it as a complete street. How can we, by the way, for Caltrans, they have the same highway design manual for 101 that they have for El Camino. It's a state highway. And they're moving in the right direction, but it is a state highway. How can we go from this kind of global level of economic development to actually do case studies and provide guidance to cities? And third, it's great that the region wants us to absorb all these housing and jobs, but what's it going to cost in terms of infrastructure, and how are we going to pay for it? And so we're doing 4 complete street studies, because VTA is doing light rail, or not light rail, they're doing BRT. These are just in San Mateo County. So that beautiful South City intersection, that's one of them. We're doing another section in San Bruno, another section in San Carlos, and one in Daly City. And these are the sections that we are designing with Caltrans to make them into complete streets. Our congestion management agency dedicated $2 million towards construction. We used that to leverage and get money from what used to be federal earmark money to complete one of the designs. So we will have a beauty contest when we're done to see who gets the money to build them. Infrastructure, again, this work is going to be coming out. It'll be on our website. We'll be presenting it at our March 27th task force meeting. What's it going to cost to create all the infrastructure for this? And then the last part of it, which we're kicking off as well, is how are we going to finance it? Are there any creative ways that we can get all of this done? The last part of our study is this economic and housing opportunities, and looking at individual case studies and what we can do with cities. I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie, but the idea was, to these case studies, was what are common themes? So, I mean, you've got a corridor with tiny lot sizes, multiple ownership, and there's all kinds of barriers to improving what's there. And that's what our case studies are going to do. So I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie. Thank you.
Thanks. So for each of the case studies, we're about 50% through, so I'm going to go through the context for the case study project area, and then I'll talk about the challenges and the barriers to development for the case study area, and then I will talk about how the case study will apply to the larger context of the Grand Boulevard, because the whole point of these case studies is to develop tools and information to address the barriers to development that will not only be useful for the city where the case study is, but for the whole corridor. Now, for Daly City, El Camino Real is called Mission Street, and so the case study is this corridor that goes from San Francisco down to Colma Bart. And in the draft general plan for the city, this is named as an area that should have higher density mixed-use development. Surrounding the corridor in yellow are these single-family neighborhoods. And the city has recently invested in streetscape improvements, including medians, sidewalk bulb outs, and this new transit center in the photo, because this is actually the Samtrans boarding location with the highest number of boardings. There's also a BART station immediately half a mile to the west of the project area, and there is the connection with Muni a quarter mile to the north. So the challenges for this case study area are, one, that there's the retail is very spread out all the way down through the corridor. It's very auto-oriented. And there's also a concentration of auto uses, like parts shops and used car lots and auto repair, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does have impacts on the urban design, because these uses typically have very low lot coverage, lots of space for cars, and very active driveways. Also, the topography is somewhat of a challenge. The whole project area is one big hill, starting at top of the hill and then going south. The parcels are very small, and they have very fragmented ownership, and this is pretty much true for 3 of the case studies. Also, the current zoning for the area doesn't really encourage more intense development. There's no minimum density, there's no minimum floor area ratio, and it's very loose in that pretty much any commercial use, like a drive-through, can come in and is allowed. And also, the corridor, this used to be the main thoroughfare through town, but then with other shopping centers coming in like Westlake and 280, it lost importance, and so now there's not very much of an identity for this corridor. And so the lessons that we're hoping to learn from this case study for the rest of the corridor are, one, how to create a positive frontage for mixed-use development, how to develop smaller lots, how to respect and have a minimal impact on adjacent single-family neighborhoods. And then this map shows in red the different nodes, and so part of the idea is understanding how it's possible to encourage nodes of activity where people actually want to get out, walk around, go to different shops, versus having strip auto-oriented retail. And then last is how to brand the corridor so that there's this area has
an identity and a place that the community recognizes within the context of the city and competing shopping centers. So for South San Francisco, the case study area is based on a 14-acre collection of sites that is at the intersection between Chestnut Ave and El Camino Real. And this area that's a little bit larger was actually, in 2011, the city adopted a specific plan for this area, and the specific plan called for the creation of a whole new node of activity, and with higher density development and higher residential development. And the project area also includes a linear park called Centennial Way, which I'll talk more about in a second. So for the challenges for this area, the current market conditions is not likely to deliver what is called for in this plan. And the loss of the redevelopment agency has been huge, because the redevelopment agency was the owner of these parcels. And so this has huge implications for site control and financing. The city was hoping to build value over time for these sites by investing in the buildings and then getting higher density development down the line. But if the city and they're in the process of figuring this out, if the city has to sell the properties right away, then it's not clear what they'll get from the current market. And then on top of all this, they were hoping on redevelopment to help pay for roadway and infrastructure improvements, which were also essential to this plan. And there's grade issues again. There's certain parcels are much lower than El Camino Real, so a building put in would have to be already very tall to have any sort of interaction with El Camino. And so for this case study, this one we're really looking at how can we make the economic case for retaining these assets after redevelopment. And also something that comes up for Grand Boulevard often is how do we reconcile a long-term vision for the corridor with what we can achieve in the shorter term. And so Belmont is our third case study. This is one of the smaller cities in the peninsula, and the case study area includes the downtown and the Caltrain station and these 4 opportunities areas shown on this map. There's a lot of surface parking lots in their downtown, and the retail is very spread out. There's not really any center of activity in this project area. And the city is in the middle of adopting new zoning for this area. And so the challenges, again, are small, irregular sites that have fragmented ownership. The infrastructure is getting older, and there's a lot of costs that are associated with that with new development. The zoning has very strict height and density standards, the current zoning. From the Caltrain station to the downtown, there's very long pedestrian crossings across El Camino. And there's actually also limited market demand for new retail in the project area. Even though it's very spread out, there's actually quite a lot of retail. And so the lessons that we're hoping to learn from this are how to align plans and policies with the market, to work with market forces, and also how to create zoning that's supportive of the Grand Boulevard vision and guiding principles. We're always looking at this interplay between ground floor retail that's required for new developments and how that affects having focused nodes of activity. And then last is how to make the case for housing in the downtown that would support the retail. So last is Mountain View. In Mountain View, the project area is this corridor on El Camino. It includes the intersection with Castro Street, which is also where the planned bus rapid transit station is. And the city is embarking on a precise plan very soon for this area. And so the challenges that this area faces, again, are small, fragmented ownership, shallow lots. The sites are so small that most of them are underparked. So there's, any new development would also be underparked, and this is a huge problem. And then also there are adjacent older single-family neighborhoods in this area. And so what we're hoping to learn from this is how to do small parcel development, looking at different creative parking solutions, how we can incentivize property owners to redevelop their properties into higher intensity uses, how to create a linkage to the downtown district. A lot of the downtowns along in the corridor are very close to El Camino Real, and in Mountain View, it's only a half mile from El Camino to the shops and the restaurants on Castro Street, but it actually feels a lot farther. It doesn't feel like it's walkable. And then also how to minimize the impact on single-family neighborhoods that are directly adjacent. So I'm going to tell you really quickly about a website that we developed. It's within the Grand Boulevard website. It's called Activity Along the Corridor. And what it came about because one of the questions that we've been asking ourselves from the beginning of this initiative is how do we really track the progress of the Grand Boulevard initiative? How do we track the progress towards the Grand Boulevard vision? And how do we even know what's really being built in the corridor? And has that changed over time? And so on our website, each Grand Boulevard member organization has a page with updates about what's happening in that city in relation to the corridor. And then there's a list of plans, projects, and programs for that city. The information originally came from many different sources, but now it's maintained by the Grand Boulevard Working Committee. So it's not just one staff person that maintains all of it. The responsibility is really spread out to the different organizations. And it's not yet an exhaustive list, but we do hope that that's the goal. And so I don't have time to show it to you right now, but I encourage you to go check it out. You can start at our website, grandboulevard.net/community. Goes directly to the Activity Along the Corridor website. So last but not least, I'm just going to highlight 3 projects that are Grand Boulevard Award winners. The purpose of the Grand Boulevard Awards program is to recognize projects and public agency planning documents that embody the Grand Boulevard guiding principles. And so first we have Centennial Way Linear Park in South San Francisco. This is an almost 3-mile linear park that is on the vacant land that is above the BART tunnels, and it stretches all the way from South San Francisco to San Bruno. And here you can see some before and after pictures. And it connects jobs and schools and recreational areas with these important transit hubs. And next we have the Menlo Park El Camino Real Downtown Vision Plan. This was a result of an extensive community engagement effort, and it really lays out the long-term vision for El Camino Real and their downtown. And last we have Via Montgomery, which is an apartment development, has ground floor retail and 58 units of very low and extremely low income housing units. There is underground parking, and it's a LEED certified building. And with that, I'm finished, and we're happy to take your questions.
Hi, I'm Wendy Crowfoot. I live in Mountain View with Great Streets Ringstar Park. I'm very, very excited about the Grand Boulevard Initiative. I want to start with that. But where I live is a mile from downtown. It's high density, lowest income area Mountain View. I'm curious why they aren't looking at actually the San Antonio Mall, which has huge amount of people who want to find a way besides a car. They go shop there. In fact, most of the supermarkets for Los Altos and Mountain View are in that area. So why is it being ignored?
Well, our concern is El Camino. I'm not sure that it's being...
El Camino is in fact the road that connects
up
them.
north of that.
It's 1 mile north of the downtown. It has major it's the major retail center for Mountain View and in fact Palo Alto and Los Altos.
So you're asking why that's not the project
Why are
area?
you ignoring it? Yeah.
You know, the city selected the project area. We didn't. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Do you
Well,
know?
you might look a little broader.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. What we rely on really is that every city is doing its own planning. So it's not, as I said, this isn't an organization. It is the table around which cities and other agencies are sitting. So relative to your question, it's something for Mountain View.
Okay.
I can say, I know that this area was selected because this particular corridor was a place where nothing new had happened ever, and that was a particular challenge to them. So when we came offering expertise addressing barriers, I think that this was the most important because they were having the most issues with it.
I'll be happy to exchange.
Okay.
Other questions from the audience?
I just want to say thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's great to hear your presentations and learn more about this work. My question is, what is next? And I understand that, for instance, council members and city gets informed by the citizens, by you. How do you go about? And the second question is, how, besides what you've giving in terms of your websites, what other ways that you are reaching out to the different communities?
Well, it wasn't the topic of this presentation, but a really big part, and it's been funded by the Community Foundation, has been outreach. So what's coming next? I think the really important thing is city councils can't approve transit plans and projects unless they have community support. And so we've been working with the Sierra Club and Greenbelt and a host of other organizations to figure out how do we get more community support for sustainable communities. So I'd say that's really big. The other big thing is, how do we actually finance all the things that we want to do? So from my perspective, those are two big ones. Do you have any more?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. Yeah, I mean, the elephant in the room, I think, building off on what you just said and your question, is the NIMBYs. And everybody know what that stands for? Yeah, not in my backyard. So, which is really the political, cultural opposition to anything that we've shown today. And it's very prevalent, I mean, throughout the Bay Area. It's not just El Camino, but it's something that we face everywhere we try to work to improve neighborhoods. And what's really important, and what the Great Communities Collaborative has been really focused on, I know you as well, is really trying to engage the YIMBYs. Yes, in my backyard. So, and it's a really difficult thing. I've spent a lot of my career doing this, and I've been at a lot of planning commission hearings when I've actually been yelled at and said, well, maybe we don't want someone like you in our neighborhood. Someone actually said that to me. And it's a very common attitude that we're up against. And it's much easier to come out and oppose things than to come up and support things, especially if you're alone. I mean, it's intimidating, so I think it's really important, as the opening panel talked about, in terms of getting together with similar-minded groups. And we've ended up working a lot, and I think maybe you have as well, with some of the faith-based groups throughout the Bay Area. So in the peninsula, it's the Peninsula Interfaith Action, and it's a group of a lot of the churches and synagogues and other religious institutions that, so that you're not alone going to hearings or community meetings and getting yelled at by the NIMBYs, but you're with a group of people that all share the values of, no, we want more housing on our neighborhood, we want more commercial development, we want these jobs, we want affordable housing, and if you have people together. So that's one thing. And the financing piece, I just wanted to touch on a program that we launched a few years ago. No, it's actually just a year and a half ago, and looks like it's about, hopefully this Wednesday at the MTC hearing, it'll grow from a $50 to a $60 million fund called the Transit Oriented Affordable Housing Fund, the TOA fund. And that fund is specifically for financing affordable housing near transit. And I hope that in the upcoming couple years, we can have some projects financed along El Camino.
Rod?
Hi guess I'm going to have to stand in front of some of you, and I apologize. First of all, I wish we could clone you folks and multiply you 1,000,000 times for the whole United States, because what you're doing is terribly, terribly important, and it's terribly difficult. And it's primarily the NIMBYs that make it difficult. It isn't brain surgery anymore in terms of what you're doing. It's the difficulty of getting it to be politically accepted. So I wish you very good luck. Could you give us an idea of what's happening? I was involved with the Grand Boulevard program when it got started, but the Manette Institute is so busy we can't do much local. And I've lost track of what's happening south of San Mateo County for the Grand Boulevard program. And secondly, Redwood City, I think, is still entertaining the serious potential of having a high-speed rail station. And that gives not only an ideal opportunity, but a very dangerous situation if you don't create better feeder and distribution programs, because otherwise the car traffic is going to kill Redwood City. So could you touch on those two? What's happening in Santa Clara County, and how is Redwood City going to address the potential of a high-speed rail station?
Well, I think the 1 minute left. I'll make a pitch here for VTA's BRT project. I mean, here you have a transit agency that's bringing $240 million to the table, which would transform El Camino. What our economic consultants have said is, if you transform the street itself, the development that we want will come. And I really think that that's the most important thing. All the cities in Santa Clara County have adopted plans that support this vision of higher density sustainable communities. And Redwood City, I think Redwood City, it's not Santa Clara County, they've got about 2,000 housing units in the pipeline in downtown Redwood City. So I mean, it's really happening. I really encourage you all, as my closing comment, to go to our website, because you can search it and find all kinds of information. Thank you.
Great, so please join me in giving another round of applause for our wonderful speakers.
I just wanted to close us out. I know that whenever I go to a conference or any kind of workshop, I always ask myself the question, either right after the workshop or maybe when I get home, what was my takeaway? What was it that I really just learned and just heard? And what was that nugget that I'm going to use? So I'm going to offer, I'm sure we all learned a lot in the past 70 minutes and heard a lot of information, but the nugget that I'd like to suggest, or one of the nuggets that you take away, is this idea of becoming and being YIMBYs and joining, so saying yes in my backyard, of finding a community of people who are YIMBYs as well. We're going to hear today, we've already heard a lot about what's going on in our region, and there's so much going on, and all of you should have that community discussion guide that was put on your seat. And on the second page, on the third page, it offers a bunch of different organizations that are acting as YIMBYs. And also there's the Grand Boulevard Initiative website that lists a bunch of different projects that are going on. This is just a taste of all of the different things that are going on. And the land use planning process and transportation planning process is complicated. And it's really hard to make that first step and to get engaged and to figure out how is it that I'm going to get involved, because it is complicated. And you shouldn't do it on your own. So I highly encourage you to find that community. And another thought, another nugget to leave you with, is this issue of why we should be doing better city planning, better urban planning, better transportation planning. And that's what this guide talks about a little bit. And I encourage you to start building your own community as well. Talk within your networks. Ask some of the questions that are listed in this discussion guide to your friends, to your neighbors. Talk about the Grand Boulevard Initiative to one person today, because in all likelihood, 99% of your network has never heard of the Grand Boulevard Initiative and isn't talking about it, and that's unfortunate. And it's actually, you came here today, and it's really up to you to decide whether or not we have a community of people who are saying, yes in my backyard, or no way, no thank you. Because those are the folks who are speaking up right now. So I really encourage you to speak up, because we need you desperately. So what I'd like to end with is, one, these Healthy Communities Forums happen every month and talk about different reasons why we should be doing better city planning and better transportation planning. So I encourage you to come to a future forum. You can find us at healthycommunitiesbayarea.org. And there's a forum planned for every month this year, healthycommunitiesbayarea.org. And also, a nice way of ending, because we have about 5 more minutes, and it's a nice transition into lunch. I'd like you to turn to your neighbor, somebody you haven't spoken with yet, and talk about what was something that surprised you most and was most interesting about this presentation that we just heard today, and/or what's something that relates the most back to my city, back to what I'm doing, back to, El Camino in my city, or maybe you live in a city like Cupertino where El Camino doesn't go through, but there's Stevens Creek, which is, and San Carlos. So even if you don't live right next to El Camino, there is a major street somewhere probably close to you. And so a lot of these ideas can be taken back to those streets as well. So I'll leave it at that. One final thank you for our speakers, and thank you so much. So yeah, I encourage you to turn to your neighbor and just share one thing that surprised you, and we'll be heading into lunch in the next 13 minutes.